Hello, good morning, and good afternoon, my future chef friends. Welcome to this month's episode of Fresh for Kids. We are making something super delicious today. We are making frittatas. Have you ever had a frittata? Do you know what a frittata is? Well, you will certainly know the answers to both of those questions at the end of this video. So, what a frittata is, it's kind of like an omelet that you bake. It's very, very simple. It's originally an Italian dish. Frittata, that word actually coming from the Italian means fried. And it was a wonderful dish that they would make to use up leftover things that they had in their pantry or in their icebox. So essentially, it is a fried omelet, but it's a little trickier than that. Let me start off by telling you everything that I'm going to be using today. Of course, we are going to be using eggs. Traditionally, this is a brunch recipe, and the reason why we're making this is because April is National Brunch Month. See, there's something else new that you learned today. And brunch is a funny word. It is actually a portmanteau, which means it is a combination of two words put together to make a new thing. So the BR is for breakfast and the UNCH is for lunch. And of course, that's really when you eat it. When it's a little too late for breakfast, but maybe a little too early for lunch. And definitely frittatas are very popular for a brunch recipe. So again, we're going to be using eggs. Today I'm going to just be using about 8 eggs. The rule of thumb is that you want 2 eggs for each person that's going to be eating with you. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but we're going to be adding a lot of other things into our frittata, so it will definitely be plenty enough. What I'm going to be adding today, I'm going to be putting in some spinach, some mushrooms, some chives, triple cheddar cheese, some little grape tomatoes or cherry tomatoes, and I'm using a red onion because they are definitely a little more flavorful and they add a nice pop of color as well. And then of course we're going to need some butter to saute all of our vegetables in, and it's going to keep the frittata from sticking to the bottom of our pan once we put it in the oven. So the tools that you're going to need, of course, you're going to need a bowl to mix your eggs in. You are going to need a whisk to whisk those up, a knife to chop your vegetables, and a rubber scraper or a spatula once we get everything cooking in the pan, because we are going to saute the vegetables first, and then we're going to add our egg mixture at the very end. So you're going to need a pan that is oven safe, because we're going to be turning our oven on to finish our frittata after we start it on our stovetop. So these are the things that we are going to need, and I will be back in just a few minutes and we will start putting together our delicious frittata. Welcome back. All right, we are ready to get started on the very first step of making our frittata. We are going to saute all of the vegetables that we're using today. Now, as I mentioned, I'm using spinach, mushrooms, chives, onions, and cherry or grape tomatoes, whichever way you like to call them. But you can use whatever kind of vegetables you prefer. There's really no rules to it. As I mentioned before, this is one of those recipes where it was just kind of use up everything in your refrigerator before it goes bad type of meal, sort of like making a casserole or a soup. You want to use up and make sure that everything that you've purchased at the market gets fully used and does not get wasted. So you could also use leftover things that are already cooked if you would like to use those as well, but I am today using all fresh vegetables. Another thing to keep in mind as we are sauteing our vegetables is you want to do it in the right order. I'm going to start with my onions because they definitely take longer to cook than the other ingredients that I'm using. So always keep that in mind as you start putting things in your saute pan. You want the things that cook the slowest to go in first, and the things that don't need very long over top of the heat to go in last, which will definitely be our garlic, because you never want to cook that too long because it gets very bitter if it gets burnt or overcooked. And we will add the spinach and our chives last because we want those to retain a little bit of their crispiness. The chives, the spinach wilts very, very quickly. So we're gonna get started with that. Let's see, let's turn on our burner. You don't want your heat to be super high, just kind of a medium heat. All right, so I've got my butter in the pan and I'm gonna start melting that down, and I will be adding one thing at a time, and we're gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper as we go. That's the way I like to season things. For each ingredient that you're adding to a dish, you wanna add a little bit of seasoning so that it stays layered throughout your entire process of cooking that particular recipe. Again, I am using butter. However, if you have dairy issues, you can absolutely use whatever kind of oil you prefer. Olive oil definitely is going to give you the most flavor, but you could use a canola oil or a vegetable oil if for health reasons you need to keep it lower in cholesterol. So we've got our butter going. Another thing to keep in mind, whenever you're sauteing anything, you want to make sure your pan is good and hot before you add your raw ingredients to the pan. Whether it is produce or a protein, you want a rambunctious round of applause to happen when you add your food to that skillet. And you will hear what I mean in just 1 second when I put these onions into this hot pan. Okay, we're good and ready. It's bubbling and ready. Cue the applause. Yay! There's really not a lot of measurements with the vegetables either. Really, you just want to keep it in line with how many people you're going to be feeding. I'm making just a fairly small one. I'm only using 8 eggs, so I don't want to use my whole onion because then it would just be overwhelmingly oniony. We don't want that. We just want the subtle hint of those onions in the background. The onions, that is your personal preference, how long you would like to sweat them or saute them down, how soft you would like them to be. And sweating is just a term that we use with aromatics, and basically that just means they're releasing their moisture and becoming a little bit softer. I want them to still have a little bit of crunch, so I'm not going to overdo it. So next I'm going to add my mushrooms, and I'm not going to use all of these. I'm just going to use about half of the container. Again, we don't want to overwhelm our dish with too much and fill it up. So we got to put all those eggs on top of all of this too. And I forgot to put salt and pepper in with my onions, so we'll add some now that we've got our mushrooms going in there. All right. Smells fantastic. And again, depending on the kind of vegetables you use, if you use like squash or peppers or anything like that, they will probably take a couple minutes longer to soften up to the degree that you like them to be, whatever softness. All right. So those are getting soft and they smell pretty fantastic. So I'm going to just add in a handful of these cherry tomatoes, which is really good when they're cooked. And you could cut those too. I like them intact. Another thing to keep in mind, especially with all this fresh produce, make sure you're rinsing everything off really well before you start cooking with it. And we got our tomatoes in there, so it's a tiny little bit more salt, tiny bit more pepper. Gotta be careful with that salt and pepper. You don't want to overdo it, make it overwhelming. Alright, so now that that's going, I'm going to go ahead and squeeze in a little bit of my garlic. And you can chop your own fresh garlic if you like, but these squeezy bottles are super convenient. And again, I'm not really using any specific measurements. I'm just going with what I like. This is a really great meal for that. All right, so now I'm gonna add in my chives. So they will be cooked, but not overcooked. You don't want them to lose all their pretty green color and flavor. It's looking beautiful. All right, those are all pretty softened up. So I'm just gonna add a handful of spinach. No matter what, how much you think you're adding and it's too much, this wilts down so tremendously that even though it looks like it's taking up a lot of room in our pan right now, it's going to decrease in size quite a bit, just like that. And of course, you could definitely add meat to this. When I made this at home last week, I used cubed ham. It was really delicious. And the great part about it was that we didn't eat all of it the first day that we made it. However, we put it in the refrigerator, and the next day we made breakfast sandwiches on bagels with it. And then the day after that, my husband made breakfast burritos with it and rolled them up in a tortilla shell. So this is really great to make other things out of it besides, you know, just having it on your brunch plate. All right. My goodness, this looks so pretty. It smells really nice too. I'm just going to turn it off because I don't want it to keep cooking, but I do want you to get a good look at how pretty that is. And we're going to just keep this to the side. And I'm going to prepare my eggs. Again, like I said, I've got 8 eggs in here, 2 for each person that you are inviting to have at your brunch meal. So I'm just gonna crack these eggs into the bowl, and I'm gonna whisk them up with a little bit of half and half. There's a wild controversy with scrambled eggs and omelet people. Some say you do not have to add dairy to it. Some people say absolutely you do. It is really up to you. I do like having dairy in it because it makes the eggs super fluffy and just adds that creaminess and richness to it. But again, it's entirely up to you. And if you are the sort of person that dairy hurts your tummy, then for sure skip it. You could add a little bit of olive oil to it if you wanted to just smooth out the mixture of eggs a little bit. And then of course just a little bit of salt and pepper, but we're not gonna add this right away. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these eggs all ready, and we will be back in just a few minutes. One thing to note, and I don't remember if I mentioned this because I've been talking to you so much about this dish, is that we want to preheat our oven to 375 degrees, because although we are cooking most everything on the stovetop, we're gonna finish it in the oven. More of that to come. We'll be right back. All right, we are back with our eggs, and I've just cracked these into the bowl, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of half and half. You could use regular milk, whole milk, whatever kind of dairy floats your boat. We're not adding a lot, just a little bit, just enough to smooth it out and give it a little bit more of a creamy, rich texture. And again, I'm gonna put some salt and pepper in here. You could absolutely add other seasonings to this if you like. A little bit of parsley, maybe some garlic or onion powder, thyme, rosemary, you know, any of those kind of herbs that do it for you. And then you're just going to whisk. And you can use an actual whisk, you can use a fork, but you just wanna make sure that whatever bowl you're mixing in, is a very big bowl by comparison to how much volume of eggs and milk you have in there. You want a little bit of extra room, so as you are whisking around, it doesn't spill out over the top of your bowl or your container. All right. Just make sure you get all those yolks broken up. Ooh, our oven is ready. Okay, make sure all of our yolks are broken. All right, that is ready to go. Okay, so we've got our pan of sauteed vegetables over here. I'm going to turn it back on low, very low heat. And we're gonna go ahead and add our cheese at this point. One thing to note, you wanna make sure that you have like a level playing field in your sauteed pan, so to speak. Kind of put your vegetables, you know, evened out so you don't have all your tomatoes in one spot. That way, no matter who gets a piece or which piece of the frittata they get an abundance of all of the vegetables and not just one thing. Just make that as even as possible. And then you're just gonna take, a couple handfuls of whatever cheese you're using. Again, I am using a triple cheddar, but maybe you like something different. I will tell you, try not to use a really dry cheese like a Parmesan or anything of that nature, because it just really doesn't melt very easily. You want something that's a little bit meltier. All right, so we've got our layer of cheese atop our vegetables, and it's just on low heat. We just want to kind of get that enough to melt the cheese a little bit on top. And once you see that melting has occurred, we are going to just give our eggs another brisk whisk. All right. And then we are going to pour our egg mixture right on top of everything. Right. Sort of like making an omelet. It really is kind of the same process. And you just want to move your pan around a little bit just to make sure that the egg is covering everything. And we're just going to let this cook for a couple of minutes until you start to see it coming, apart from the edge of your pan. So we don't want it to be on too high. You just enough heat to get the cooking process started, but not enough to overdo it. All right. Smells really super fantastic, by the way. And then we are going to take the whole pan off of our burner, and we are going to put it in our 375-degree oven for about 8 to 10 minutes. I would check it at the 8-minute mark. The way you will know if it's done, if you press down slightly with a fork or a spoon into the egg, and if when you do that, liquid egg sort of fills in that hole that you've just pushed down, that definitely means your eggs are not finished cooking and you want to give it just another couple of minutes. But if you push down and it's just spongy and it bounces right back, then your eggs are definitely ready. All right, so this is ready to go in the oven. Okay, burner. Just put it right on your middle tray in your oven, 375 degrees. I'm gonna set my timer for 8 minutes, and we will be back when this frittata is finished, and I'll show you how lovely and delicious it's going to be. All right, it is time for us to take our frittata out of the oven. I did test it with my spoon, and it bounced right back, so we are ready to go. Our oven mitt, pull it out. This is gonna be super duper hot. Oh my gosh, it looks beautiful. You can see it. All right, we're gonna sit it right here to cool off for just one moment. So this is really the true test of making a frittata. Because what's gonna happen is we're gonna take this dish, we're gonna put it over top, and we're gonna flip the whole thing so that it all comes out. That's why it's important to use a little more oil or butter when you're sauteing those vegetables than you would ordinarily use if you were just sauteing the vegetables for some other recipe. So it is a little bit tricky. So I'm gonna take my rubber scraper and just go around the edges just to loosen it up a little bit. And make sure you're using your oven mitts. Okay. Let's see if it worked. Oven mitt, still hot. Oh, it's almost perfect. A little bit of my stuff got stuck to the pan, but all in all, it looks quite pretty. And if you have a little accident there on the top where it's a little bit messed up, you can just add a little bit more cheese to the top of this and no one will ever know the difference. But definitely using a non-stick pan is a little more efficient with making a frittata, but it came out beautifully and it smells so good. And if you were wondering, yes, this is very similar to a quiche. It's essentially a quiche without a pie crust underneath it. So if you are watching your carbs and not wanting to eat a lot of things that have flour in it for a variety of reasons, this is an excellent brunch dish to make to impress your friends and family. So once this cools down, I'm absolutely going to be eating some of this for my lunch today. Whatever vegetables or meats or whatever you choose to put in your frittata, it is going to be delicious, and I would love to see a picture of it and hear what ingredients you used when you made yours at home. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us for Fresh for Kids, and we will see you next month here at the Maitland Public Library. Bye.